led by China. And we have forestry policy and payment for ecosystem service, which is kind of universal across the country. So those are the policy, those are the key instrument that the countries are using at the moment. And a lot will come in the coming years. But like I showed before, to achieve the share goals that we lay out in the Paris Agreement, then maybe we may need more. Okay, so this is an APP event. So let me spend 1 or 2 minutes to talk about climate finance. And the trend is that Asia is receiving increasing funding from international sources. And this is a good sign, but there are still a lot of problems in the funding mechanism. First, most of the fund flows into rich country rather than poor one. The second is that although the multilateral climate funds is the official mechanism that allow country to carry out their own plan in their own climate agenda, but most of the fund will avoid this channel. Only 4% will flow via this channel. So the country, they don't have much autonomy, but they have to depend on the will of the sponsor. And also, we find that very little portion of the fund comes from the private sector. So we need to improve that too. And if we look at the inclusiveness aspect of funding, we find that the gap of funding between mitigation and adaptation funding is still very large. And adaptation funding is kind of important in terms of dealing with the vulnerable groups, improving equality. And if we look at gender targeting, how they put the objective of gender inequality in the funding mechanism, then it's still a bad situation because most of the fund hasn't considered gender inequality as an important objective. So to give remarks, the first thing I want to say is that developing country in Asia show strong commitments to the global agenda in dealing with climate change, but they still face a lot of difficulties and they will need a lot of international support. And so why there is a positive shift toward gender inclusive in the commitment, but there's still a gap between commitments and policy making. And the last one is that we need to improve funding mechanism, including funding via the climate funds. We need more funds from the private sector and we need more gender targeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wang, for a very informative overview, general pictures of the inclusive low carbon transition strategy in almost every members of Asian countries, right? And now we would like to introduce the second speaker, Dr. Phumsit Mahasu Virachai. Dr. Phumsit will be presenting a case study on greening agriculture in Thailand and how it can contribute to the inclusive low carbon transition. Dr. Phumsit is an associate professor at Khon Kaen University in Thailand. He is a behavioral economist who focuses on improving the rate of new technology adoption for small-scale farmers to enhance their livelihoods and reduce agricultural footprint. So Dr. Phumsit's research also focuses on farmers' household financial management, including household saving and debt. So You want to go here?
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Phumsis, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Nat. Also, thank you for the civil society and they to have me here. First, today, as Dr. Nat introduced, I am behavioral economist, but today I won't present anything regarding to behavioral economics. So the research that I will present today will be based on the big project that I work with UNEP regarding to key agricultural projects that focus on rice study in Thailand. So the presentation today is a part of that stuff. Why is rice in Thailand? Domestically, right? Area in Thailand cover more than 50% of agricultural area in Thailand. Second, more than 30% of Thai population is rice farmer. Third, rice sector in Thailand produce the highest greenhouse gas and also air pollution in the agricultural sector in Thailand. Internationally, Thailand is always top 3 of rice exporters in the world for decades. So that means rice sector is not just important in Thailand only, but in global, at least in terms of food security. So this study we started in 2019, just 4 or 5 months before COVID-19 started the countries, but we still continue this project. Before I go to the detail of the project, I just would like to introduce the researcher in the teams, because this study is multidisciplinary research. So that means not just only economists in the team, but also soil scientists, biologists, climate experts, and also spatial modeling joining this project together. And we're still working together for the second phase of this project. So the main objective actually of this not this study, but for these presentations is we want to identify measures and projects the impact of different rice cultivations or different rice practice on more than just economic, but also environments, health of people, and also farmer incomes. So we based on our analysis on scenario analysis because we want to project to the futures. If the rice area in Thailand changes at different levels from conventional rice to organic rice, what's going to be happening in the futures in the next 15 years? So we create 4 scenarios to analyze the impacts of different rice cultivations. The scenario development is based on the policy and the potential policy of Thailand governments in terms of leading the rice sectors to cleaner ways. The first scenario we call it as a business as usual. For the business as usual, we based on the current pilot policy of the current governments that introduced the program is called 1 million lives program. The government provide temporary subsidy to the government, to the farmer to switch from conventional rice to organic rice. For this pilot project, the target is 1 million lives or about 160 life is unit in Thailand. You see the note I forgot in the index. It's about like 1,600,000 hectares. So this scenario based on assumption that when the pilot projects end, which actually ended last year, there is no continuance of this project anymore. So in this case, the organic rice areas in Thailand is gonna just only allow 1,700,000 hectares until 2035. The second scenario, the second scenario, we call it accessible organic rice promotions. In this case, we assume that the 1 million life program is continuous every year until 2035. And in this case, the total organic rice area going to turn to around 6,400,000 hectares, or cover around 11% of the total rice area in Thailand. And the third scenario, we call it enhanced scenario. In this case, government not just introduce the 1 million life program, but they also implement and introduce the new policy or interventions that enhance more switching from conventional rice to organic rice. In this case, the area of organic rice going to turn into 2.4 million hectares by 2035, or cover around 41% of the total rice area. And the last one, in those scenarios, in this case, actually the Thai parliaments have targets. We call the sustainable, for me, it's very skeptical plan is to bring the agricultural sector in Thailand to be the sustainable agricultural practice, which includes organic practice. The target of Thai parliament in this case, they want to change the rice areas to organic rice by 2030, and switching the rice area to organic rice by about 5.1 million hectares, or cover almost 90% of the total rice areas in Thailand. We base this, we analyze the variables and the measure that we want to measure and predict based on this scenario. Sorry, I forgot to tell you. The red dot is the projections of the area change that switch from conventional to organic rice in these years. So the first dimensions we want to measure the impact of transitions from conventional rice to organic rice based on our scenario is environment. There are two measures that we want to measure in this case: greenhouse gas emissions and biodiversity in the rice fields. For greenhouse gas emissions, there are two sources of greenhouse gas generated from rice cultivations. The first one is soil carbon sequestration, which is the ability of sink the carbon into the soil. The higher ability of sink the carbon to the soil is the better. Right? The second source is the greenhouse gas generated during the cultivations. This includes methane and nitrous oxide. The higher the emissions, it's not good, right? And the third one, in Thailand, the conventional rice, for the conventional rice, many farmers burn the rice field after harvesting the grain. Burning in this case creates two sources, two things: greenhouse gas and air pollution, especially for PM 2.5. We also measure this one too. And this is a factor that we control in our model. I won't go to the details. At least we cover for soil characteristics, we cover for the climate data, and also we cover the variable regarding to the practice. And the results from our model suggest that the right side, my right side here, is the average greenhouse gas sink or emits based on organic and conventional rice. On average, the organic rice practice generate less greenhouse gas from burning, because organic rice burning is completely prohibited for organic rice. If a farmer want to get a certificate, they cannot burn their rice fields after harvest. The second source that is better in terms of greenhouse gas when compared to the conventional, right, is the ability to sink the carbon to the soil. However, during the cultivations or during the growing the rice, organic rice practice generate more greenhouse gas than the conventional ones because of the soil organic carbon is so rich in organic rice field. So that's why they release more methane than the conventional rice, but not for the nitrous oxide. However, let me skip that part. However, when we combine all three sources of the greenhouse gas together, based on the scenario, when compared to the business as usual scenario, we see the positive, which is the benefits in terms of the US dollar of greenhouse gas reductions. In this graph, what does it mean? It means like the higher the areas of organic rice is the better, because the greenhouse we get more benefit from the greenhouse gas reductions when compared to the business as usual. The second part, the second variable that we measure for the environments is biodiversity. In this case, our biodiversity is based on the insects in the right field. There are two types of the insects. The first one is predatory insects or the good insects that control the pests. The second one is the pests that destroy the crops, in this case, the rice. And we use the Shannon winner index. So don't ask me because I didn't do this by this part by myself because my biologist did this for me. But I just know that the higher the index is the richest of biodiversity. That means the food chains of the biodiversity is complete. That means the nature's ecosystem can control itself. And from this graph, you can see, especially for the scenario 3 and scenario 4, the blue and the sorry, you can see that the higher the organic rice areas, the better the biodiversity index. And if you measure in numbers of the channel winner index, you can see that in 2035, the index in scenario 4 that have the highest organic rice area is almost 4 times higher than the business as usual, the index of the business as usual scenarios. However, for the biodiversity, we can find the good financial proxies to turn this into the monetary value. So we just keep it there. And we know that organic is better in terms of biodiversity. At least farmers get benefits because they do not want to rely on pesticides, insecticides, right? Because the nature can control itself. So in this case, it's also shown up as the health of the farmer. This is how much the health cost can be reduced from pesticide poisonings. So in this case, we use a choice experiments survey to measure how much the benefit occurs from health cost reductions. And as you can see, 0.04 always turn the high benefits in terms of health cost reductions. So from now, you can see that when we're talking about environments, when we're talking about health of people, organic rice practice is significantly and clearly outperforms the conventional one, right? And when we're talking about environments, at least environment, we're talking about this benefit is not just the farmer benefit, but the public benefit, right? Greenhouse gas, air pollution, and biodiversity. Then we turn to I call the private benefit. right? We're talking about farmer incomes. What happens if the farmers adopt organic rice? In this case, we measure the yield of the rice based on two practice and also the cost. These two items can then show us how much profits or the income farmer get from these two rice practice. So we measure rice yields and also we measure the cost of cultivations. So just go to the conclusion graph. This graph shows the profits based on each scenario. The income, the yield, times the price of the rice minus the cost of producing, of growing rice. That means the profits from each scenario. In this case, it's going to be S2, S3, and S4. Actually, because we use a BAU, the business as usual, is reference. Compared to the business as usual scenarios, in this case, the higher the organic rice values, the higher loss to the farmer income. Why? The main items that contributes to the loss in terms of the farmer income in this case is the yield deductions of organic rice practice. So in this case, when we're talking about organic rice practice and conventional rice practice, we see that organic rice generate public benefit. But when we turn to the private benefit, in this case, the farmers who are the one to decide whether to adopt or not adopt organic practice, they lost. And then we have some scenarios is showing by this chart. Okay, I gotta go a little bit quick. As you can see, like from this chart, almost all item is positive. Each line showing the scenario 2, 3, and 4 compared to the BA, except for the income that dropped sharply, especially for the scenario 4. There is a trade-off between publics and the private benefits, right? That's a trade-off. And then when we combine the number together by 3 dimensions, environment, health, and income of farmers, environments, and health of the people is positive and can offset the loss of the farmer, right? Loss of the farmer, for example, in the scenario 4 is 300, almost 400 million US dollar in total in the scenario 4. The net benefit outperforms, right? In this case, we sum together, but the point is the one who decide is lost. The one who decide to adopt or not adopt, the organ is lost. So from this study, we know that organic rice practice clearly provide benefits to society. However, farmers will bear the loss if they adopt it. What should we do? From our study, we further calculate. First, we want to check if we want to use a market driven, how much the price of organic rice should be higher to compensate the loss of the farmers. We found that at least 5% of the premium price for organic rice is necessary to cover the loss that will happen from the yield deductions. This is very crucial because even we can provide temporary subsidy to convince the farmer to switch from conventional to organic rice. If the market does not work, in this case, there is no premium price. The farmer tend likely to switch back to the conventional one. So, so the last page, please. because I have the website of this report. For someone who would like to go into more details and the materials of these projects, it's almost there. It's okay. It's showing this over there. Okay. Okay. Thank you for your patience. Just a little. Yes, if you're interested and want to find out more about this study, please go to that website. It's not just only contain the information of TEEP project in Thailand, but also other countries. There are lots of material, reports, video clips for this study. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A great study, an important study. Have you sent it to the journal later? You know, I wish I can do that research in Vietnam. I'm from Vietnam. You know, Vietnam and Thailand. Vietnam's the second exporter of rice. We compete with Thailand for the first. It seems that you go ahead with this research. Thank you very much. Now we move on to the local governance. The final speaker of the today's sections, Dr. James Castillo, who will discuss the Filipino local governance model and how it has strengthened the community resilience and through the co-creation process. So Dr. James Castillo is the president of the Resources and Environmental Economics Foundation of the Philippines and the national director of the Environmental Economic Group of the Philippines. So Dr. James is a local and international expert in natural resources and environmental economics involved in wealth accounting, valuation of ecosystem services, economics of environmental governance and climate change, forest land use planning, economics of coastal resources management and payment of environmental services, and among many others. So Dr. James Castillo is the moment for you to speak.
Thank you, Dr. Nam and Dr. Jung and Dr. Wang for those, I would say, the precursor, because this one shifts to the application of these evidences provided at the local level. So my first statement, I would say that, as we always heard, is climate change is global, but climate action should be local. And that's a strong word to say because, in fact, a lot of efforts have to be done at the local level. And so what I'm presenting to you is sort of an integration of evidences from researches and from studies, and together with a local group of stakeholders, we work on how we can come up with local action. And so what I'm presenting today is actually sort of an insights from what the sites that we have been undertaking. This is actually funded by the Partnership for Transparency Foundation, Washington, D.C., and implemented by locals. And so let me present to you the sort of a project because this is crucial. It's a partnership. And so it's a partnership of local stakeholders, a partnership of community development experts, and also a partnership together with experts in the field of climate change who are international engagement, local engagement, and national engagement. And so it's really a challenge of how we bring science and community development together to address the issue of resiliency, particularly on climate change. So we have here the Masari, which is actually a local translation of what in a local dialect means resiliency. So Masari project means the drive is towards resiliency. And the other part is climate change and environmental governance. Here we introduce tools and scientific evidences to support the capacity of local stakeholders to address challenges of climate issues. And we are implementing this in a city that is subject always on a regular basis, because Philippines, as you know, is visited by typhoons. Every year there are 20 typhoons that visit the country, and many of those typhoons have devastating effects. And so the Masari project is a way of improving resiliency of local communities. And part of that Masari project, which is actually advocate for the partnership for transparency for the sustainable integrated area development. In the site, we wanted to localize the name so that people can actually understand what it means. We're not using highly technical terms, although most of us have technical experiences, so that people can relate. And so the idea is that we want to engage continually with stakeholders, particularly engaging them in decision making. And stakeholders can have access to government resources and services, and even in terms of information. And we want to enhance engagement of different stakeholders. Also, at the same time, institutionalize mechanisms that will integrate scientific evidences and people participation together, addressing the same issue of sustainability. And of course, the contribution of our site, which I'm part of the climate change environmental governance site, which provide evidence because we come from a group of experts supporting the other side, which is the Masari project. Our engagement is in capacity building for this project. And so we go to the site. Irica City is actually larger than Incheon, 3 times, with a population of 114,000 people. And from my information provided to us, even the slightest, or I mean, the heavy rains, not even a typhoon, causes flooding in these areas. And there are 36 barangays. We call it a local name for local villages or communities. And there are actually also indigenous people. Sometimes we call them marginalized groups. And so we want to engage with them as well. And so what they did is basically arrange cities into zones, or we call it ecosystems, and identify different issues from these different zones. So we have mountain ecosystems, new roads ecosystem, they have what they call urban ecosystems, and of course the river ecosystems. The emphasis on rivers is because a lot of the issues on flooding are coming from these rivers. So what we did is basically analyze what is going on in Irica City. And from the scientific side, we're looking at why is there constant flooding, even without typhoons? Why is there so much engagement in change in terms of flooding over time? And so we introduced to them different ways of understanding the situation by letting them learn what it is, how to map their sites, where are those flooding occurring, which areas are affected, how much of the population are affected, and as a result of the flooding, what's going on with their agricultural areas, what's going on with their upland areas, which are typically supposedly forested areas, and how is it contributing to flooding. And these are the things that we as a project, together with the community development experts, are presenting and helping local people understand scientific and climate information, just like Dr. Fung presented. Our expertise is basically bringing to them these issues like the benefits and the cost of different options and scenarios for the particular options for how to address climate issues in their respective fields. So we introduced what we call the co-creation approach. So basically involving different stakeholders, and we as the science part engage with these communities, but we translate scientific and technical information into locally understandable terms, noting that they are the ones who will be doing the action on climate change. And so we hear them, we listen to them. So it is a collaborative process. And so essentially communities are actively engaged, understanding different technical terms translated by us into local terms. And so the co-creation approach, essentially, we have three major concepts that it's basically because the economy environment partnership promotes transdisciplinary approach. So our approach is basically co-design with the different stakeholders solutions. It's not just a top-down approach. We provide knowledge, ideas, and resources for people from different sources, people from different stakeholders, get their perspectives, also engage the experts so that we can have sort of a collaborative solution. It's not just a solution provided by experts, it is a solution that's shared and discussed among different stakeholders. So we work together to co-design. And this is the idea of the co-creation. And so we say that it's not just the scientific information we run down to their throats, but no. What we essentially say, this is what we know. How do you interpret the result? And how would you provide solutions based on your interpretation of results? And so this is really with the co-creation process. Actually, I'm presenting it in different forms, but it is not a sequential approach. But essentially, when we say participatory planning, at the very start, we engage with them, both the experts and community development experts. We engage them in planning. So that includes stakeholders from the government, from the businesses, from community service organizations, and other stakeholders, even communities. And in the co-creation workshop, we identify solutions together with them. So we say we brainstorm, come up with ideas, and come up with solutions together. And then with those solutions, we identify priorities, and so we do some scenario planning, just like what Dr. Fung presented. We shared with them different scenarios about climate action. And then, of course, during dialogue sessions, we introduce such terms as photo voice, where we ask people what their impressions are of different government programs, and they use photos to present to government. This is the situation of what you have undertaken in terms of program implementation by the government. And so we also have deliberative forums, meaning we discuss and dialogue. Other than the dialogue, we discuss which of those priorities have significant contribution. And so it's really a process that we don't design them ourselves in a sequential place, but basically on a continuing, actively engaging process. And so, of course, in any undertaking, you need to have an institutional setup. The only way that we can engage people, not only from the government side, is bring them to a mechanism called what we call a co-creation task force. And so they themselves identified what are these aspects, what are these areas that they need to identify in terms of task forces. So they have identified social protection as one of the more important aspects because of the concerns and issues of gender, marginalization of indigenous peoples, and so on. And so the social protection component is very relevant. Second is, of course, they have to have, because the issue is resiliency. And so whether it's a resilient infrastructure, in our case, we say that it's not just gray infrastructure. We also introduce options of nature-based solutions or non-gray infrastructures, and we presented them different options. And in different sites, they have different applications for different communities. So it's not just one solution for one whole city, but different solutions for different communities, depending on their needs and priorities. And we also have a task force environment and climate, emphasizing that they are always subject to typhoons and hydrometeorological disasters and so on. And of course, the issue of climate change is impact on health and so on. So that means that these task forces are not a creation of the project, but it was a decision made together along with the different stakeholders. And so are the results. And so the outcome of our projects so far is that they have created what they call a community scorecard. In that approach, what they do is basically rate the different programs of the government, they create their own criteria and indicators of measures, and present this in a dialogue. So the community scorecard can be in the form of a voice or a sort of a petition. And then because of their need to also bring into the government funding mechanism the annual investment plan, they were being trained in terms of budget allocation. And in fact, as a result of that, the city's annual investment plan included 23 approved proposals from CSOs, amounting to about 33 million or about 600,000 US dollars. That's about, although it's not as significant, it's about 3% of the total budget, but at least CSOs were able to introduce allocations for projects that they have identified. And so, apart from that, of course, we need to improve the resiliency, so a day of financial literacy and training are being conducted at the site for different stakeholders. And of course, there are specific requests. Issue of greening, and of course, they introduce organic farming, especially in areas that are already subjected to a lot of commercial fertilizers that reduce its productivity. And the development of the citizens' agenda, this is very interesting because CSOs are given the opportunity to present to planners what are the different priorities and agenda of civil society organizations. And so they come up with a list that they present in a dialogue with local government unit through the task force, the co-creation task force. And one of the demands, of course, is actually, as you will know, the upper part of the city is, the lower part of the city is constantly flooded, but there is an issue that was raised by those in the uplands communities. Although the lowlands are experiencing water, but those in the uplands are experiencing water deficiency. So one of the projects, a pilot project in terms of the creation approach, is the supply of water. How do we create a program together as stakeholders to come up with a water supply and address the water supply issue in the locality? So the business community, which was represented by the water district, the civil society organization, the academic institution, there was 2 universities that provided technical expertise in terms of water supply technologies, and the local government unit providing this framework and this institutional support in terms of policies. And they were able to come up with a water supply project for the particular one of the communities in that site. So these are the things that we have experienced, and also they have their own citizens' agenda that was presented, including addressing issues of not only water supply, but issues of impact of flooding. And there's respective sites, for instance, they have difficulties over flooding, and so they introduced the irrigation canal widening and so on, or the meandering of the rivers that's affecting certain parts of the community. So that includes a combination of water supply proposals. And so from the technical expertise side, what we presented to them, so that's the Masaryk side, the community development side. From the technical science side, we engage with them through making them understand what's the climate change problem in their site. It's not just because people like government provided tools like local climate action plan, local climate risk assessment plan, but doesn't really involve them. So they have to we make them understand the problem. Where is that flooding occurring? What is the source? Where is that river going through? And what is the issue with the irrigation canals? And then in the identifying of the potential solutions, we may have our own solutions, but we put it on secondary. We first ask them, what are your solutions? And what will be the impact of those solutions based from a science perspective? And then, of course, we evaluate the effectiveness. That is where we ask them, take a photo of those projects and say what it can be done, what can be done in order to improve or make it more sustainable. And then, of course, the process of consensus building. We, from the expert side, would say, this is what you know, and this is what we understand it. Let's bring together and come up with an appropriate solution that is evidence-based, science-based, and yet at the same time addressing the needs of the people. And of course, including ensuring accountability. The reason for this is we want that the implementation of the project will have the trust of the people. It's not just because it's the scientists who did it for us, so we assume that it's correct, but they are not involved. They are not deeply engaged. So the only way is for them to engage. We engage with them so that we can build their trust when it comes to the solution to the problem. Okay, so we had virtual trainings because it was COVID time. We endeavored to engage them. Okay, so we had workshops and other guys. We told them what it means to have local climate action plan. We told them what it is to do climate risk assessment. And of course, we prepared a proposal. One of the issues that local societies have been able to address issues is because the fund that's supposedly the People Survival Food Fund that would address climate issues are not being used sufficiently because people are not learning how to develop proposals. And so we taught them to develop proposals to be submitted for funding by the national government. So we revised their proposals based on their suggestions. And so we were able to submit it and awaiting decision by the national government. So essentially, what I have in terms of insights is that it's really improved building the capacity using evidence is a crucial part of the co-creation process. It should be really innovative because a lot of solutions, people are already getting used to it, and it should entertain diverse perspectives, different opinions. And local governance should involve people not only from local government, and of course, involving the communities in the development process. So these are the things, these are insights that we learn. We also learn from them, not only that they learn from us. We as scientists should learn in order to improve our communication and our research objective and agenda. That's all for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. What a very rich and insightful talk. It's very great to look at the inclusive low carbon transition from the grassroots level, as you just presented. Now, I would like to invite Ms. Heidi for your reaction on the presentation and the ADB's perspective, in particular in perhaps the greening agriculture.
Yes. Actually, I'm privileged to be a part of this panel because I think it's one of the most interesting panels that actually talk about the problem, but also bring evidence to the table. And I think it's a very powerful discussion. We started with your discussion here, Dr. Kwang, with the policy overall. Are we being coherent policy-wise, right?
Yeah.
Is what we're saying we're doing, is it, so you're looking at this at the macro level. And I think this is something we need to look at in terms of, we claim to be climate friendly, but are we really? And I think this is really something that, in terms of advocacy, this is what every CSOs need to learn from. Look at the policy, tell the story, look for the evidence, and then do this. And I think your kind of research will be very valuable to civil society communities who look to advocate on policy change and seeing the evidence. I think, and the second presentation is doing scenario testing, run tests, run examples, and see where the gaps are. And I was excited to see, yes, you have this overall benefit for climate with the organic farming. But then we show the reality is that it costs money to farmers, right? So farmers will make less money. Are we willing to pay? So the question is, who's paying at the end? Will government subsidize the farmers who will be producing organic rice? Will consumers be willing to pay for the extra pesos or dollars or won for buying organic rice? In Cambodia, where I worked many years ago, we had something called ibis rice. Ibis rice means rice that is friendly to birds, the ibis that we seek to preserve. So then the cost of ibis rice is more expensive, but it's the cost of giving back to the environment. Who's willing to pay that cost? And I think more and more the consumers are more educated and the consumers worry about their health and safety and they want organic products. And I think governments can do a really good thing in helping to promote organic products. And your research is actually bringing evidence to the table to say, yes, overall, there is an economic benefit to society producing, I think, common public goods, right? So contributing to helping the climate and helping the environment recover is very important. And farmers shifting to agriculture, organic farming can really give back to the soil. So we've been taking back from Mother Earth for many, many years. It's time to give back. As an economist, we always say there's no such thing as free lunch. Right? So if you're eating somewhere and you're eating something, there's somebody paying. Who's paying? So all over the years, it's been Mother Earth paying. So now it's time for us, the people, to give back. And I think the two research here is really evidence of that. We need to do more. And I really love the last research piece too, because I think it's about bringing people together with science. And you can have very good science, but if you cannot communicate to the people, then your science is not very useful. So when I was in graduate school, I remember the question is always, what story can you tell with the data? Can you tell a story that people would understand? What language would you use to explain to the people, right? And I think, Dr. Jam, you got that process. And as also a development person, I really like the co-creation aspect. And I like the way you bring people together. It's actually a long process, consulting with communities, working with communities, bringing them on board to understand fully what needs to be transformed and what needs to be done. So I was reading in our colleagues, private sector colleagues, the work that they've been doing. So I have a colleague who unfortunately cannot be with us, but he talks a lot about investment in farmers. So investment, the role of ADB actually is to invest, to bring resources to incentivize people to do things for the environment. So one of the objective is actually there's an initiative in Asia Pacific for our colleagues to partner with private sector and partner with agro industry to train farmers, small farmers. I think there's an objective to train 106,000 farmers. So far, they trained about 40,000 farmers in some of the techniques and methods to be more environmentally friendly in your farming methods. So I think getting communities to adopt it, getting small farmers to adopt the process is very important. Another one is about behavior change. I think changing the way we eat, the food we eat, where it comes from. So one of the challenge is, food now moves all over the world, right? So before we buy something, ask yourself, where does this come from? Am I supporting the farmer? So understanding where our food comes from, making that conscious choice. And also, as a meat eater, we need to shift to eating more vegetables or eat tofu. I think in Vietnam, there was a lot of substituting tofu for meat. And I think a lot of vegetarians are doing that now as well. So I think there's a lot to be said that needs to be done. And I think ADB is working with small farmers, but we're also working with agro industry and also working with governments to look at the food supply chain and how to bring food from farm to table in a shorter time span and preserving the quality of the food and helping farmers to produce food with quality investing in organic as well as investing in low fertilizer use or methodologies that would preserve water. So these are some of the methods that we do in some of the projects. I remember looking at the Central West projects where we were looking at investing in warehouses to help farmers, cooperatives, put their produce so that they can bring their produce to the farm and not have it be spoiled. So these are some of the ways we look at that. And then we also look at the input that goes into the production of crops. Is it investing a lot in fertilizer or chemicals, or can it be done in a way where it's safer, healthier? And I think these are the reality we face in today's world. So I really appreciate your three research. And my colleague Marcel and I agree that this is the panel that we will learn a lot from. So I look forward to reading your reports further.
Thank you very much for your very insightful comments, and your perspective is valuable for us. I think that now we open the floor for comments and questions. We value your opinions and questions, so we would love to hear from you. So please. Yes, yes.
Hi, I'm Sheba. I'm actually one of the youth ambassadors, and I'm a food technologist as well. So I found it really amazing to have that organic rice project, and I was so keen in the presentation. So when I was listening to the part, especially providing income for the farmers in a definitive way, I was thinking in a food supply chain, the key agent should be the consumer. So in that project, how about the processing stage, and after how about the end consumers? Because when we see about the organic products that's available in market, it will be so costlier than the conventional products in the market. So when it comes to developing countries, for example, India, not many people will rely on organic products and high quality products. So if the project is having that much costlier from the producer perspective, then what about the consumer side? If that struggle will be not accessible for the consumer side as well. I found that this particular rice is actually region specific. So is there any possibility for the extensibility of this particular project to other Asian countries? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Actually, for this project, when we start, we try to look into the value chains of the rice. In this case, the consumer is very important. And actually, currently, the supply of organic rice, in Thailand, is actually the demand is higher than the supply. So currently, farmers still get the premium price, right? And a lot of the group of farmers actually exports the rice to developed country like in the EU or in the US or Japan. And when we survey them, we found that most of them said they don't have enough supply to sell each year because there are a lot of customers, especially from the foreign countries, want to get the supply of the organic rice from them. However, when we look into the scenario, we project into the futures. Right now, we have less supply of organic rice. But if the scenario 4 can be happening, that's when we're going to have abundance of organic rice supply. And at that time, we don't know yet, or we don't know exactly how consumer going to respond to the abundance of the supply of organic rice at that time. And it might be that the price is going to go down as a conventional one because we have more than the supply is a lot, right? And at that time, go back to Heidi said, if that happens, we need to think about maybe temporary subsidies or something similar that to make sure that we can keep the farmer continuous. Because when the farmer continue the organic practice, it's not only provide a common public goods to the society. Even the subsidy, the net benefit is going to be higher than the cost for the subsidy. That we try to project to the future. Yeah. Thank you.
But food, I think subsidy is just the only one thing. You know, I'm thinking, I really love the scenario for the time parliament plan. So if you can reach to that point, that's like ideal. But how to do that? How to make scenario for reality, not only subsidy is just very small instrument.
Thank you, Nam. That is a good question and also hard questions. Because when in this case we're talking about like the adoptions. Right? When we're talking the adoption, we're talking about the farmers. When we're talking about the farmer, most of the farmers, at least in Thailand, is relatively poor farmers. They have uncertain economic status. Even if most of Thai farmers is not starving, they're not absolutely poor. But the economic status is uncertain. To convince them to switch to something new, and they don't have any experience before, it's difficult. Even we show them, okay, hey, if you produce organic rice, you may get the premium price. You can get more profit, more income from selling your rice than the conventional one that you practice now. Most of them just say yes, and they don't adopt. This is from my experience. Why? Because farmer will see the new practice as a risky choice. Because if they miss or if they cannot get the yields or the cost at they predict, what happens? It's going to hurt their household a lot, right? In terms of maybe debt, lost income, more debt to cope the problem. Well, I think for the starting point, we may need, I think we still need the incentive to cover the list, at least during the transitions, to make sure that farmer think or feel like, okay, changing from conventional one to organic rice is not a risky choice anymore. We have, actually I have the small experiments done in this study, and we found that the temporary incentive, especially income subsidy, we're going to give them the income, the certain income. If they adopt the organic rice, we're going to give them at least they will get this amount of income per hectares. Whether they can produce the yield based on that target or not. And we found that this can bring a lot of farmers to adopt the organics. However, it's not in there, right? Because we cannot always subsidy them all the time. The next step is we need to look into the value chains. How can we develop the markets, right? Domestically, internationally. That's very important. And also the consumer side. As I said, consumer is very important because farmer can produce. However, if consumer not willing to pay for the premium price for the benefit that they get from the organic practice, it's going to be not sustained.
I think I was thinking, when you said that, I was thinking of an organic rice bond. Like, they issue bond, like green bonds and blue bonds, whatever. I think organic rice bond, where you can get an agricultural farm bank to work with you. Usually government has like agricultural or farming or something bank. And you work with them and maybe issue a special bond where consumers who's willing to support agricultural rice can purchase the bond and then in return support the farmers and like certain number of years before they can get a renewal of the bond and all that. I think some of these financial instruments is maybe good to explore with the agricultural banks.
Any questions or comments? Yeah, we know that big events very close. I think it's that your great ideas on the organic rice bond close the sections. We close the session by that one. So thank you very much for thank you presenters and for Haley for taking the time to join us. Thank you all participants for your very thoughtful question from the audience and and special thanks to ADB for organizing the conference and for continued support research, advancing our research and also the policy agenda in this field. And thank you everyone to joining us today and we close the session. Thank you.
Thank you.